Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Silver the Hedgehog here, and I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Sonic X Shadow Generations for the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X/S, PC Steam, and Nintendo Switch, plus Nintendo Switch 2, thanks to backwards compatibility, as you probably already know coming up. So, last time, we essentially did manage to show you guys some last few extras in terms of Sonic Generations Remaster by only showing you guys classic Supersonic and modern Supersonic alongside with the forms of the collection room, just to show you guys the forms of not only a certain amount of Chao we did some rescue for, in addition to concept art and also checking out the actual music list alongside with the character biography. And finally, most notably though, we also did manage to check out the statue room, which thankfully though, no codes needs to be required this time. So even then no, because everything else checks out there, in terms of every single statues we did somehow obtained. So today, ladies and gentlemen, we'll present to you the next game for this particular package, and this is going to be an exciting one out of the bunch. That's what appears to be Shadow Generations. Now, this entire game, much like the forms of how it does it in Bowser's Fury from the likes of Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, this particular game is entirely brand new, all things considered. Well, despite the fact that the entire length itself is going to be slightly shorter in comparison to the forms of the remastered version of the already existing game since like a couple of years ago, but I'm very excited about the forms of experiencing Shadow Generations as a result, because basically the entire structure of the game plays pretty similar to the forms of how it does it on Sonic Generations, but there are some slight differences. Like, as you can tell, there's no classic Shadow to be found. Like, for instance though, I don't think it's a possibility we can able to actually see Dreamcast model of Shadow based off from Sonic Adventure 2. So yeah, and also similar to the forms of how it does it when if you do manage to select let's just say, for instance, in Bowser's Fury, from the likes of Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, there's no loading screen transition for whenever you try to select Shadow Generations right there, because as you can tell, that basically though we can able to actually select those specific options right from the start, rather than just try to wait for about a few seconds to load on the actual proper title screen. So relatively speaking, I was about the fact it looks kind of similar for that regard. So anyway, now as far as the forms of the option settings I might actually go for, in terms of Shadow Generations, not only did I manage to able to set the control types once again on Legacy mode, because obviously I'm more accustomed to that control scheme right now, and as far as the forms of the actual sound settings, as far as I'm aware, I'm actually going to be setting on voice sounds up to 100, so just in case we can able to hear the in-game dialogue. And on top of all that stuff though, I feel like about the fact that there's actually an additional thing, but let's not get ahead of ourselves, because the first thing we want to show off is the actual backstory of Shadow's story. So as a result, you're able to actually get that particular part right from the start. So yeah, let's have a brief watch of it.
50 years ago, aboard the space colony Ark, the genius Professor Gerald Robotnik sought to create the ultimate life form. He called his creation Shadow. Shadow was raised alongside Gerald's ailing granddaughter, Maria. They were inseparable. A series of tragedies befell the Ark. The military sought to cover everything up. They took the lives of Gerald and Maria and sealed Shadow away. 50 years later, Shadow was awakened, filled with anger and sadness. He was haunted by Maria's final words to him.
Shadow, I beg of you, for all the people on that planet.
Shadow was bent on revenge and sought to destroy the world. At the last moment, Shadow remembered Maria's final wish, to protect her beloved planet and all who lived there. There were more secrets to Shadow's past. Shadow was generated from the DNA of the evil alien conqueror Black Doom. Shadow didn't understand why Black Doom expected him to be the vanguard for his invasion of Earth. After many battles, Shadow crushed Black Doom and his forces, finally breaking free from his past. Shadow the Hedgehog, the lone dark warrior who judges the world by his own code. The past will return to haunt him.
So yeah, that was a pretty interesting backstory. Now, as far as I'm aware, that when it comes to the bonus content, as you saw on that particular selection menu, well, obviously that was about the fact that the bonus content was only exclusive onto not only for PlayStation 4, but as well as PlayStation 5 as well, which I'll explain more about that if we dive into this game for reals. So as you can see, we also got ourselves 3 save files, much like the forms of how it does it on Sonic Generations Remaster, but either way, let's dive into Shadow Generations.
Can we wake him up now? Can I meet him?
I believe so, yes. It is time to awaken the ultimate life form. Welcome to the world, Shadow the Hedgehog.
Shadow, this is Rouge. Do you copy?
Shadow here. I copy.
Are you still aboard the Ark?
Yes, I arrived at the space colony an hour ago.
Well, you're missing the birthday party. I hope you're planning on being here.
I already told you. Gunn detected an unusual biosignature aboard the Ark. I'm not leaving until I eliminate any possible threat.
There's free food.
There.
Okay, so it looks like we're about to investigate into the forms of Space Colony Ark, and it looks like, similar to the forms of how it does it in Sonic Generations itself, basically though, we're about to jump right into the level instantly. So as you can see, this particular level right here looks a bit familiar to you, doesn't it? Or to be more accurate though, it's like a combination of multiple levels within, let's just say 2 games at the same time, which not only for the fact that we ended up in Act 1 of this particular stage, which appears to be called Space Colony Ark, but as far as I'm aware, this particular stage is more accurately based off from the likes of not only from Sonic Adventure 2, but same applies with Shadow the Hedgehog as well. Because the reason why I say this is because this entire stage, Space Colony Ark, is basically feels more accurately a combination of, let's just say, both Final Rush and Final Chase from the likes of Sonic Adventure 2, and Crazy Gadget and the Ark from Shadow the Hedgehog as far as I'm aware, but I digress. So obviously that was about the fact that, if you couldn't tell already, that the entire gameplay of Shadow Generations plays rather similar to the forms of how it does it in Sonic Generations, but there are some noticeable differences. Like for one, the running speed looks a bit slightly similar to the forms of how it does it for Sonic Frontiers, and second of all, as you can see, the main aspect about the forms of Shadow Generations, as you can definitely tell, Shadow can able to perform a Chaos Powers, or to be more accurate though, Chaos Control, where every time whenever you do manage to defeat certain amount of enemies, basically though, as you can tell on the bottom center of the corner of the screen, basically though, it actually tells you how much energy you do have when it comes to using the Chaos Control, and then once the actual gauge fills up, you can able to actually activate the Chaos Control ability, which actually stops time, and not just because they stops time, but it also freezes obstacles in place. So as a result though, this is actually a pretty cool ability to have, because unlike the forms of how it does it in Shadow 05, where basically the Chaos Control just allows you to able to skip a huge chunks of a level, and not just that, however though, that you can obviously try to able to have infinite amount of ammo, assuming if you do have guns with you, which as a result well, exponentially speaking, I was about the fact I don't think it's possible we can able to actually utilize with the guns in this game this time, because it's pretty similar to Sonic Generations, except you're now able to take control of Shadow at all times, because, well, let's face it though, it is nice about the fact that Shadow does have its own game at long last, after the events of Shadow 05, for the likes of the Nintendo GameCube and PlayStation 2 and Xbox. So generally speaking, I was about the fact that whenever when, you know, Shadow Generations was first being revealed, back in June Evolves in the beginning of last year, in 2024, I was very optimistic, and it's also very exciting as well, because, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that, well, obviously though, you can still able to try to boost, and once you do manage to collect quite a lot of rings, obviously though it actually increases your boost gauge, similar to the defaults of how it does on Sonic Generations, including Sonic Unleashed as well, for the likes of the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, Wii and PlayStation 2, despite the fact that both Wii and PS2 versions are entirely different, all things considered. And what in the world is going on here? It's not Doom's Eye? Wow, I was not expecting to see him return, but either way. Also, this bit does remind me like a similar vibes as the films of the Doctor Strange movies, including the films of Spider-Man No Way Home, at least as far as I've noticed, especially concerning for the fact that we somehow ended up in a familiar environment based off from Sonic Adventure 2, and suffice to say, it sort of feels like Radical Highway vibes to it though. I mean, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that it seems goes all over the place as far as I'm aware. And also, you do able to actually realize about this is about the fact that the actual physics in Shadow Generations feels a lot different in comparison to Sonic Generations, because, I mean, let's face it though, it's about the fact that the momentum and the physics in Shadow Generations is obviously almost inspired by Sonic Frontiers, back in 2022. However, though, the biggest difference is this time around, though, is that we can no longer perform a drop dash ability, only Sonic can. So, either way, man, I really love the cinematics so far. Especially, it gets almost like a actual huge cinematic vibes to it, though. And as far as I'm aware, though, we definitely need to avoid a lot of hazards here and there, and it's especially noticeable concerning for the fact that, well, oh gee, it looks like that Doom's Eye's voice sounds a lot different this time. Because I already know for the fact that back in Shadow the Hedgehog, that basically that particular voice sounds a bit familiar back in Shadow the Hedgehog, where he does have the exact same voice as the English dub version of Goku from the likes of Dragon Ball Z. And yeah, it's so weird, you know? But as you can see, since we actually deal with the forms of Doom's Eye, and as a result, in order able to try to deal with him is by homing attack into one of those familiar gun robots from the likes of in Sonic Adventure 2, and basically that is about the fact you have to do it for about 5 times until you're able to take down his shield, and then out of nowhere, we got ourselves a familiar emblem based off from the likes of Shadow the Hedgehog. So yeah, that's actually quite interesting to say the least, and also we got ourselves our first S rank, and yeah, pretty cool start, especially concerning for the fact that we'll discuss more about the entire Shadow Generations as a result if we get onto the later stages to come. So either way, that concludes Act 1 in Space Colony Arc.
The fake Chaos Emerald Tails made to foil the Doctor's plans. Even I have a hard time distinguishing between the two of them.
Well then, once again we've somehow transported into white space, thanks to the brief appearance of Time Eater. Except this time, if you couldn't tell already, rather than just trying to able to go into explore into white space in 2D, so instead, as you can see, we now ended up in a 3D version of white space, which I think is actually pretty cool, because kind of thinking about it though, oh, and there's also this little strange portal, which does manage to appear right near to the Space Colony Ark, which, truth be told, there it is right there. And speaking of which, we're able to actually come across into E123 Omega, which as a result though, that he was not appeared in Sonic Generations, so generally speaking though, it's nice to be able to actually see E123 Omega after the events of, let's just say, Sonic Forces and Team Sonic Racing, so even then though, yeah, it seems pretty cool though. And also similar to the forms of how it does in Sonic Generations, where basically though you can able to have a discussion of the familiar characters and stuff like that, to able to actually understand of what's going on. So as you can see, we're now going to be exploring into, as I said before, a 3D version of white space. And as far as I'm aware, the entire structure of this hub world looks remarkably similar, actually, as the forms of how it does it for Sonic Frontiers. However, there's some noticeable difference you might able to realize about this, is that I don't think there's any possibilities we can able to actually do some combat this time around. So instead though, it's just simple homing attack chains and all that stuff. And also, as far as I'm aware, that the more you progress into the game, that at the moment right now, that there's only like this small area we can able to explore into at the moment. And as far as you can definitely see on screen, not only does it contain those familiar collectibles, which appears to be called machine parts, that so far we actually did collected quite a few of them so far, but as well as that though, similar to the forms of how it does it on most Zelda games in the past, ranging from The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, there's going to be some treasure chests that we can able to activate by only collecting those specific collectibles, if you couldn't tell already, where unlike the forms of how it does it in Sonic Generations, that you can only collect the red star rings in that game, well, in Shadow Generations, if you couldn't tell, the collectibles are a lot different this time, and these are known as collection keys. And basically though, there are 3 of them in each and every single stage in the game, and in order to able to go for a 400% completion of Shadow Generations, is that basically though, we have to not only try to collect not only all of these collection keys, but also about the fact that, get this, you not only need to find every single collection chests, but as well as that though, we have to collect all of those machine parts, which I'll talk more about that if we get on to the further progression in terms of the white space in 3D. So generally speaking though, yeah, as you can see, we now ended up in Act 2 of Space Colony Ark, and as you can tell, the entire act structure plays a little bit more of an opposite version of Sonic Generations. Like for instance though, in Sonic Generations, in Act 1 you obviously take control of classic Sonic that plays radically in 2D, whilst in Act 2 you're able to take control of modern Sonic where everything else is all in 3D, despite the fact that in some sections are in 2D sometimes. That might be seems a little bit overly redundant. But even then though, as you can tell, when it comes to, in comparison to the forms of Act 1 and Act 2, when it comes to Shadow Generations, is that in Act 1, that basically though, the entire gameplay is basically like entirely in 3D, whilst in Act 2, if you couldn't tell, is strictly in 2D. So as a result though, yeah, you can definitely tell this is more likely the opposite version of Sonic Generations for some aspects. So, in addition to that though, is about the fact that if you couldn't tell, there are some sections about the fact that you do need to activate the Chaos Spear ability, where basically though, in order to able to try to perform that is by pressing the triangle button, if I'm assuming so anyway, on the PlayStation versions, and basically though, you can able to utilize the Chaos Spear abilities to activate certain switches if you couldn't tell. And on top of all that stuff though, is about the fact that, well, I can assure to you about the fact that there are some important aspects later on when it comes to Shadow Generations coming up for it. But either way though, let's not get ourselves to this point right now, so let's just activate another switch to able to actually activate multiple doors. And what the heck? What the heck is going on? Oh jeez. Gee, I wasn't expecting that particular transformation, huh? So yeah, the actual main selling point in terms of Shadow Generations, if you couldn't tell, these what appears to be known as the Doom powers. And basically, there are, let's just say there are a grand total of like, I don't know, 5 of these Doom powers, at least as far as I do know it. But the first one of the bunch though, if you couldn't tell already, we're able to actually have wings. And basically, this allows you to able to actually fly. Like, specifically trying to go straight forward in 2D levels. And as far as I'm usually concerned, that as soon as we're able to get into the later portions of the game though, well, I'm probably not going to explain things more about it though, concerning for the fact that Shadow Generations was a relatively brand new kind of game. So as a result though, I'm probably not going to mention any spoilers for the time being, unless if we get some more progression out of the way. So either way, so yeah, a few things I want to talk about is about the fact that, well, today's date of course is the 29th of January today, in some cases in 2025 today. So it looks like no matter what though, we've only got about 3 more days to go until we're about to be approaching on to February. So as a result though, yeah, nothing else I can really say of what's to be coming for February as a matter of fact. So anyway, so far we actually got yet another S rank, and somehow we got the trophy, so by restoring the Space Colony Ark. So yeah, pretty top notch.
What was that new power? I've never done anything like that before. It's not something I should normally be able to do, yet it felt natural. What could be causing these mutations?
Maria, wait!
Maria? No. She's gone. I'm seeing things. Maria!
Shadow, I beg of you. Please, do it for me.
Maria?
For all the people on that planet. Sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog.
I need to stay focused. Deal with the problem at hand, not chase dreams.
I'm very curious to know what's beyond above in the skies above in the white space, which as a result, it could be something more related to like, I don't know, Black Doom or something like that, because of this familiar eyes and stuff like that. So relatively speaking, I was about the fact that as you can see, we somehow managed able to equip one of those Doom gears somehow, and if I recall correctly, we do need to able to come across into that familiar object, which as you can see right there, able to actually try to able to trigger something. So now before we get into that though, I just want to quickly double check on the specific exploration factor, because yes, much like defaults of how it does in Sonic Frontiers, there's going to be a lot of times until when you get to later progressioning for this entire game that you do realize there's going to be some more stuff to do, especially not only you can able to experience certain recreations of certain stages, but also you can able to do some more stuff until you're able to actually expand upon, you know, a lot of exploration, you know?
No.
Oh jeez, I feel so sorry for Shadow right now. Ah, we get another one of those Doom powers, which appears to be Doom Spears, which is basically, it's more likely like an upgraded version of Chaos Spear, where basically though you can only target one enemy at a time with regular Chaos Spear, whilst in a Doom Spears, basically though you can able to actually do multiple targets at once, if you couldn't tell from that particular activating that door familiar. So now we can able to progress, and usually relatively speaking though, when it comes to Doom powers, as far as I'm aware, these are important when it comes to certain progression, when it comes to certain stages later on, especially concerning for the fact that there's going to be a lot of times about the fact that we have to deal with the forms of multitude of switches and certain obstacles and all that stuff. So yeah, nothing else to add. So, anyways, also I just want to classify for mentioning about this, potentially speaking now, that's better late than never, I suppose, but happy birthday to Jim Carrey, that, you know, who did the voice of Dr. Robotnik or Dr. Eggman for the likes of the recent Sonic movies. So, and I can't even believe by saying this, but he was now 63 years old right now, which, gee, time flies, especially considering for the fact that, well, he obviously did a remarkable job when it comes to voicing, not only just trying to voice as Eggman, but also play as Eggman during the films of the Sonic movies, apart from, Knuckles the series, just because, obviously, though, the villain itself is entirely different, of course. So, anyway, so now we can able to progress, and it looks like we might able to actually play the next stage, at least as far as I do notice. But before we get to that though, I just need able to be sure I need to check on something. To be more accurate though, if I was trying to hunt down for those, the most annoying collectibles, I will admit it though right away, which appears to be the machine parts, which, I'm not gonna lie, those machine parts are basically the Sonic's equivalent, or should I say, Shadow's equivalent to these, you know, with the forms of the most annoying collectibles in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which appears to be the Korok seeds. Well, basically though, it's like the equivalent to that. However though, the amount of machine parts you can only find at minimum, which appears to be 80 of them. So thankfully though, there's no 900 or 1000 especially when it comes to both of those Zelda games in particular. So with that being said, let's dive into the next stage. And as far as I'm aware, this level right here might look a bit familiar to you. And as far as I'm aware, we have to deal with a lot of rail grinding in here. And as far as I'm aware, this level right here is actually known as Rail Canyon from Sonic Heroes, which obviously though that stage was originated from Sonic Heroes, taking place on the 4th zone in that game, and alongside with the forms of Bullet Station as well. So I would have expected about the fact that we have to deal with a lot of rail grinding in this particular stage right here, but thankfully though, this entire stage is nowhere near as frustrating compared to the forms of how it does in Sonic Heroes, just because for one thing, jumping from rail to rail is much more simple this time, because basically though it's about the fact that similar to Sonic Generations, that obviously though you can able to actually just press the bumper buttons if you try to hop onto the next rail to the upper. That could be also applies with Sonic Unleashed as well, and also say applies with Sonic Colors as well, despite in Sonic Colors that you can only tilt the analog stick in the corresponding directions. So I mean, look at the how much amazing this particular visuals actually looked out to be. In terms of Shadow Generations, if you couldn't tell already, because of the lighting, and despite the fact that on the PlayStation 4 version, the game will still runs at 30 FPS as opposed to 60 FPS, unlike the PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X for that matter. But usually, relatively speaking, similar to the forms of how it does it for Sonic Frontiers though, that the game itself doesn't actually look that bad. Especially concerning for the fact that obviously though, similar to the forms of how it does in our most recent Sonic games throughout the years as far as I'm aware, that obviously though is about the fact that Shadow Generations portion is made for the sake of the forms of Hedgehog Engine 2, as opposed to Hedgehog Engine 1 from the likes of the forms of ever since in Sonic Generations. So, relatively speaking, is about the fact that you pretty much already expect of wants to able to actually notice something like this. Oh yeah, there's going to be some occasional obstacles like these little fans, which obviously blows you from above, and we can able to actually continue our progression in here. And oh gee, we're getting interrupted again with the forms that, let me guess, Doomseye. Yep, Doomseye just somehow makes us a brief appearance again. And suffice to say, we ended up going back into that familiar environment again, based off from Radical Highway from Sonic Adventure 2. I have no idea why that Doomsday was so obsessed with that particular environment in the first place. I totally get it about the fact that it's more accurately like Shadow's version of Green Hill Zone all over again, but except the fact that it's more accurately like a city level rather than just a lush green environment. So, but anyways, and of course, just like the evolves of how it does it on Sonic Generations, you can still able to actually do skydiving, but here's the thing though, we have to avoid a lot of stuff, which as a result, my goodness gracious, I was not expecting that particular stuff we have to avoid most of our times, so I digress. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below for the question of the day. What was your first impressions about the forms of Shadow Generations? Because I would like to hear your thoughts, because I will say, this is a really good addition to the Sonic Generations Remaster, or should I say, the Awesome Edition, when it comes to the forms if you were able to actually recommend getting Sonic Generations again, but with additional bonus content such as Shadow Generations with an entirely all-new experience. So, but either way though, I'll explain more details about that if we get onto the actual, the final stretch, and suffice to say, we're now on to the second half in terms of this entire Let's Play of Sonic X Shadow Generations for right now. So yeah, that's actually pretty awesome to me, so I digress. Now, if you're curious to know what really happens if you don't manage to able to attack Doomsday in time, well obviously though you will miss your chance to able to actually get that particular emblem collectible from the likes of Shadow the Hedgehog with that familiar emblem icon based off of the title logo from Shadow the Hedgehog, as you probably already know. Well, basically that was about the fact I'm pretty sure those collectibles are most likely going to be important to you, because otherwise if you miss that out, then you have to replay the entire stage again, unless if you do die by complete accident or something like that. Well, despite the fact that sometimes though is about the fact that certain aspects can be autopilot sometimes, much like in Sonic Forces, but thankfully though, most of these stages in Shadow Generations are much more lengthier in comparison to the forms of how it does it are not only the majority of the stages from Sonic Forces, thankfully, but alongside with the forms of the cyberspace segments in Sonic Frontiers, because, well, straight to the point though, I very appreciate about the fact that the level's length for Shadow Generations is much more longer in comparison to those two Sonic games as I mentioned earlier. So either way though, and in order to able to get the S rank this time around though, is that, well, dying is not so much noticeable this time, so instead what you have to do, if you couldn't tell already, in order to able to actually achieve the glorious S rank in Shadow Generations is that basically, is that you have to reach a certain amount of score points. Like, for instance though, in order to able to achieve the S rank in Shadow Generations is that you need to reach for about 40,000 points, as opposed to in Sonic Generations, you need to reach for about let's just say 50,000 points in order to able to achieve the glorious S rank in most of these stages. So, it also means about the fact that unlike in Sonic Generations though, that there was actually a specific condition in order to able to get the S rank in that game, that basically though, there was actually a condition called perfect clear, meaning about the fact you could not afford to able to die once during the actual stage, and as a result you're able to get the glorious S rank. However, that's not the case this time around though in Shadow Generations, because suffice to say, much like the forms of how it does it in, well, let's just say in Sonic Forces, alongside with the forms of Sonic Colors Ultimate and Sonic Frontiers, as you can see, the life system has been completely non-existent in Shadow Generations, because you can simply just die as many times you want to this time around, and so much so for the fact that in order to able to try to master your S rank requirements is that not only do you have to keep your highest amount of ring count if possible, but it's also straight to the point that you have to be super darn quick about when it comes to completing several stages, because as far as I'm aware, that's what the Chaos Control ability comes into play. So basically though, it's about the fact that if you think you're about to be almost running out of time to able to actually guarantee to get yourselves a glorious S rank, well obviously though, it's about the fact that you can able to actually trigger Chaos Control ability as quite frequent as possible. So as a result though, because again, in order to able to actually fill up the gauge, you must able to defeat not only certain enemies, but it's also about the fact that there are a few rare occasions where you might able to actually stumble across into those familiar mini balloons that basically though, in order to able to destroy them, if you couldn't tell, you can just simply jump right into them, or simply just try to use the Chaos Spear in order to able to actually fill up your Chaos Control gauge, and as a result, it only lasted for about 5 seconds if you do manage to able to activate the Chaos Control ability. So as a result though, yeah, it's a great way if you really want to go for every single S ranks as much as possible, assuming of course about the fact that if you try to go after one of those achievements or trophies on the Xbox or PlayStation systems, so, but either way. And also, another thing else you might able to expect to realize about this is about the fact that on the PC version of Shadow Generations, the insane amount of mods are everywhere when it comes to Shadow Generations so far. Like, one of the most popular examples, which appears to be Surge the Tarmac from the likes of the Sonic comics, and as a result though, that she does look very, very awesome, especially concerning for the fact that again, it's just basically a mod, so as a result though, it's about the fact that we can able to actually expect able to have that particular conversation for later time, so I digress. Now, much like the forms of how it does on these red star rings from Sonic Generations, if I do end up missing a couple of those collection keys, well, I can just simply just try to replay the actual stages as many times as I want. And we're about to get chased by this particular familiar train, but thankfully though we can now use the boost, so naturally speaking we're able to actually get away just in time. So either way, yet again we got a nice little glorious S rank, especially concerning for the fact that then again we did manage to practice this entire Shadow Generations game, not only for the Nintendo Switch, but alongside with the Xbox One versions as well. And generally speaking, I was about the fact that I've also realized that the graphics on the Nintendo Switch version is not exactly the most pleasing to see. But aside from all that stuff, though, it's about the fact that it still runs on 30 FPS, much like the forms of how it does on the Xbox One version and the PlayStation 4 version to top it off as well. And it looks like we might be able to actually learn the next Doom Power ability, which as a result is going to be located somewhere on least one of those buildings as far as I'm aware. But before we end off the video right here, oh, what's this?
Oh, hello, Shadow.
Please don't smash us to bits!
So then, conveniently enough, we somehow bump into not only Orbot, but also Cubot as well, despite the fact that they both seemed able to have cameo appearance when it comes to Sonic Generations, and during the forms within the final boss against with the Time Eater. Well, they're now here, and it may look like that about the fact that we do need to collect, you know what the forms of those machine parts as we've already collected so far? Well, that's how about the fact that that's how this particular part comes into play. And basically though, like I said before, the maximum you can only get up to is 80 machine parts, so generally speaking that certain parts are pretty well hidden, so I will try my best to able to try to find some of them, but not all of them on a singular run, I'm afraid. That's because no matter what though, this is only just the beginning, you know. So with that being said folks, is that we get endings of this point right here. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Sonic X Shadow Generations. While we're going to be playing through Shadow Generations, is that we're about able to investigate with this particular building in the background. So generally speaking I'm very curious to know what secrets they'll somehow brings us into. But I'll see you guys until tomorrow. Later fellas.